make sure that it's working. Okay, all's good. So, how's everybody doing? 3 full days. Yeah, see, Robbie's there, yeah. You know, I think really the main feature of all the interviews, you know, if we look at just the interviews that everybody went through today, of course, everybody's very different experiences and unique experience, etc. But yesterday and today, I'm seeing a general trend where the mind and the body are slowly starting to really adjust into the retreat conditions. And it's not always easy. It's not always easy to do. And really, you know, like I've been saying every day, don't underestimate the value of this work that you're doing. It's really great. Yeah. And you can see that in your own practice, that the wisdom gradually unfolds. Your capacities, your abilities gradually unfold, and it's not based on something that somebody gave you or you know, a piece of technology that you plug into or anything like that. It's your own mindfulness. So really, everything is very much in our own hands. And if we just kind of look back at the general theme of this whole retreat, you know, it's based on the Four Noble Truths. Truth number 1 is what? The truth of? Yeah, great. Yeah, unsatisfactoriness, or the S word, suffering. The truth of unsatisfactoriness. Truth number 2, noble truth, high truth, ultimate truth, absolute truth. Yeah. The truth of the cause, that, you know, grasping and clinging. We spoke about these in the last few days. Truth number 3, the third noble truth, is the truth of the truth of what? Well, the truth of letting go, the truth of cessation or stopping or relinquishing the cause. Yeah, we stop the cause. When you stop the cause, it actually stops the unsatisfactoriness. And maybe even, I think even in today's interview, some people could see that, you know, as we kind of worked with the object a little bit. And, you know, I asked these questions, were you mindful? Everybody says, yeah. Everybody says that. Were you mindful of the dissatisfaction, or were you mindful of the planning, or were you mindful of this, or were you mindful of that? Everybody says, yeah. And I said, great, so what were you mindful of? Yeah, I was mindful. Yeah, but what were you mindful of? So they have to look and feel a little bit more. And then as you're able to work with that and see, yeah, I was mindful of this, and it brought tension here, or my mind was planning and all these. And then as you stay with it, what happens to it, it dissolves and now it's gone. And where's that tension? Oh yeah, that tension's gone too. So these are like little realizations. They're both the kind of the relinquishing, the letting go, and realizing, yeah, this is actually how it works. It works this way. It's amazing. And of course, the fourth noble truth is the truth of the path, that there is a path of practice that leads to the lessening and eventually eradication. Oh my gosh. The eradication of suffering. And each one of these truths has a corresponding practice. And really the theme is not the Four Noble Truths, but these 4 noble practices. And in relationship to unsatisfactoriness, what is the noble practice? It's the noble practice of acceptance, yeah. Yeah, now according to like the Buddhist text, it's kind of understanding or acceptance. And it's really just to kind of like, you know, accept this truth. Even though we still got a lot of work to do, accept it, you know. When there's that dissatisfaction is going to be there. And the reason that we accept it is because just the kind of the basic instinct in a way. And when I say basic instinct, I mean really, really basic. Like basic. When there's something unsatisfying, we just don't, there's just a movement away from it. We don't want to accept it. We might go into control, or we might go into avoidance or denial or whatever. Or like, or self, you know, poor me, like self-pity. All of these things we can do. But beneath all of that, there's just this kind of not willing to accept it. And all the practice really begins with the practice of acceptance. Even though acceptance is really kind of a culmination of the practice, that you are in acceptance always. So that's the first noble practice in relationship to that truth of suffering. The second noble practice, which we spoke about yesterday, in relationship to the truth of the cause, is the practice of letting go. Yeah, relinquishing, the relinquishing. Do you know the story of the man who falls into the hole? I know it's a story that's used in the mindfulness communities quite a bit. And Rob Vinken from See Through and from I Am, he told me that they use these in some of their training. This story, it's from the Tibetan tradition. It's about a man walking down the road, minding his own business. He didn't hurt anybody. He's not bothering anybody. It's a public place. He's going along, and next thing he knows, his world turned upside down. It's very dark and black, and he's in tremendous pain. You know what happened? That just happened. Just like, oh. So he kind of looks around and he realizes that he fell into a hole. You know, a dark, dark, deep hole, and he's in pain and it's hurting. And oh my God, poor guy, suffering. He didn't even do anything. He's just suffering. So he climbs up out of the hole. Cleans himself off, you know, and he looks back, he realizes what he did. Oh yeah, I walked and I fell in that hole. So he goes on. Next day he's coming down the road again, minding his own business, really not harming anybody, and he senses that, oh my God, I'm falling here. And it's getting dark, and spam, he hits the ground, and it's like, oh, all kinds of pain, and he says, I did it again. I think I fell. And he climbs out and he says, I fell in that hole again. Goes home, goes on, comes back the next day. He's walking down the road, and just before he steps into the hole, he sees it's a hole. Oh my God, it's a hole. He steps in, falls down, crash bang, you know, hurts, ow, 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 dukkha, 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 climbs out, goes home. Next day he comes back and he's walking down the road, and he's learning from experience. He says, I'm gonna be super mindful today, super mindful. He walks down the road. A few feet before he gets to the hole, he sees, there's the hole. He walks into the hole and he falls down and he hurts himself. And he gets the same thing, yeah. Karma, momentum. You have to just accept the way it's going to go. Even when we know it, we're like, oh, I'm not going to do it. Boom, right in it. Goes home, cleans himself up. Next day, new start. He's walking down the road, sees the hole, and just as he's stepping, he's able to kind of, with mindfulness, in between stimulus and response. Yeah, he's able to kind of, now he's mindful enough to insert his mindfulness in that chain of events. And he has a choice. He's like, and with all of his his heroic effort, he pulls his foot back, and he goes around the hole. Amazing. Next day, comes along, walks down the road. There's the hole, and he learns how to walk around it and go on. So these are really, what we're seeing is the first two noble truths here. It is the first two noble truths, that there's a truth of unsatisfactoriness. That's a truth. He keeps falling and hurting himself. There's a truth of a cause. He's something about who he is, doesn't really see the whole. Other people see it. He doesn't see it. He goes in. But we also see the two noble practices. The first noble practice of accepting. Each time he fell into it, he accepted, oh yeah, this happened to me. He did a little kind of, after review, and he reviewed it, and he said, okay, this keeps going on, and yeah, this sucks, this hurts, this is painful. There's this thing called dukkha, and dukkha sucks. It really does suck. It's like, dukkha. And he's starting to accept it. First noble truth. Then the second noble truth is the truth of letting go. Through practice, through hard work, a lot of, learning the hard way. Some people have to learn the hard way. There are people, I promise you, and maybe they're even in this room, that it happens once, it's enough. They never do it again. And there's other people, like me and maybe a few here, we have to go into the whole, we keep like a bull, just we keep charging and we're going. And eventually we kind of get it. And it's like, okay, wait a second. And we learn how to let go. And dukkha is the great teacher. Unsatisfactoriness is the great teacher. We learn how to let go. And eventually he's able to go down that road and really see the whole situation and then walk around. Those are the first two noble practices. But that's not the end of the story. Because there's another day. He comes along. He walks down, he's going down a road. He comes to that road and he says, no. And he takes another road. He takes another road. He realizes, that's the realization, that that road is not a good road for him. It's not a healthy road. And there's no momentum there. There's no social pressure. There's no, his friends aren't saying, hey, come on. None of that. He in his own maturity, he's able to choose another path. And that's the third noble practice. The third noble truth is the truth of the cause of suffering, this kind of grasping and clinging, these identifications that we all have. And the third noble practice is the truth of realization, when we finally get it. All this letting go it's kind of a momentary realization. In the moment I let go and it's like, oh yeah, I realize oh my God, all that suffering or all that misery or all that, that worrying or planning, whatever we have. We're like, oh yeah, I can let that go. We go back and we sit down and next thing we know, we're worrying again. We're back in the loop. There's a lot of momentum to these things. But with practice, heroic effort, we get to the point where we really realize the letting go. Now, in neuroscience, they've already began to discover for years, a few decades now, they're discovering what the Buddhists have been saying forever, that you can shape the mind with meditation. That you can shape the mind with meditation. We're shaping our mind. And in neuroscience, it's called neuroplasticity. It's not about the mind, it's about the brain, the physical brain, that we have this kind of neural pathways. There's all these neural pathways in the brain, and every time we have certain thoughts, there's little, what are they? What are those things called? Huh? Synapses and impulses. What? Yeah, so these little energy is transmitted as thoughts, and and it creates actual physical pathways in the brain. Yeah, we have this neural net, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of them, a bunch of little things and little neurotransmitters, and they fire. And if you have a habit to think about doomsday. Oh, doomsday! Oh, the end of the world! Again, I'm not to joke about it, but just imagine it's something really extreme. Your mind, not your mind. Of course, your mind becomes conditioned, but your brain actually creates pathways that are made of unhealthy thoughts. Just whatever. All the thoughts that we have. When I say unhealthy thoughts, all of us have some thoughts that are maybe not the most skillful thoughts for us, and maybe for other people. And when there's neural pathways like that, the tendency to have those thoughts is kind of hardwired. Make sense? The tendency to think, I don't know, imagine I have a depressive thought, that I've had a depressive thought for years, and I keep thinking about this one thought all the time. Oh, this, oh, that, I go into it, and people tell me, it's not that bad. No, it's okay. You can see, look at the bright side. And I'm like, yeah, the bright side, oh, that bad thought. And I keep going into it. It's a bad habit of the mind, but it's also physical pathways in the brain. That's the karma. Mental and physical karma. Now, how do you change the mind? We change the mind through mindfulness, but how do you change those physical pathways? Oh my God. Actually, it's not that hard. Well, it is. It does take work. But as we practice mindfulness, we become mindful of those patterns. The man became mindful of that stepping in the hole, and he was able to choose something else. And the path that he chose became a healthy path with less pain, less suffering, less. Yeah. Now, it turns out those neurotransmitters also, if they're not constantly being charged, they begin to atrophy. It's like, if you go to the gym and you exercise all the time, then you stop exercising for a few years, your muscle becomes like flabby. There's not much muscle there. It's the same thing with the brain synapses. the actual hardware starts to change. And the thoughts that we have instead create new neural pathways. And in Buddhist meditation, they've been teaching for millennia that as you practice meditation, unwholesome, unskillful mental states will gradually begin to reduce. Things like desires and aversions and fears and sleepiness and restlessness and doubts and regrets. We all have these thoughts, but they're not the most skillful thoughts. But it's okay that we have them. But those will begin to reduce through the practice of meditation, and maybe even you're noticing just in 2-3 days here, you might even be noticing that those are kind of calming down a bit. And as those reduce, they become replaced with wholesome, skillful, more positive mental states. Things like mindfulness, things like concentration, mental states like faith, joy, bliss, compassion, sympathetic joy, joy for others, metta, loving kindness. These things, this is a natural course of the practice. We don't have to, okay, I'm going to get rid of that and catch that. No, you don't have to do any of that. It naturally happens. And of course, wisdom also grows. And this is the realization that we have through the course of our practice. And when it comes to the practice of realization, there's 2 types of realization. You know Ernest Hemingway? Yeah. Apparently at one point in his life he was bankrupt. He lost all his money. And a friend asked him, he said, how did you become bankrupt? He said it happened in 2 ways. First, it was gradual, and then it was sudden. And it turns out that realization is exactly the same. That it's gradual, and then it's sudden, and then it's gradual again. So what is gradual realization? Gradual realization is basically every little insight that we get, every moment that we have like an opening and we see something, and we know that we're seeing something maybe for the first time, but we realize it's an insight, that we're getting a peek into something that's liberating. Maybe I was able to work with pain in a certain way, and it's like, whoa, what happened? That pain, it tremendously reduced. And all of the normal stuff that I go through really, really kind of reduced. Maybe even the pain just disappears. That's a realization. Now, I'm not saying that'll happen every time, but that definitely can happen when we learn how to skillfully work with physical pains. I've told several people yesterday, today, to take pain as an object. When it comes up, spend some time on it. Spend a few minutes on it. See what happens there. There's a lot to learn. Pain is, you don't have to look at pain, but first we tend to avoid pain. So there's that whole avoidance thing that we want to work with. Second, it's kind of intense. Pain is like, it's an intense experience. So it's kind of a clear-cut object. So if you have the capacity to really observe it, then spend a few minutes with it. If not 20 minutes or 30 minutes with it, and see what happens. See what you learn there. It sharpens the insight really amazingly. So one way that we kind of we have these gradual realizations is like working with a pain and suddenly it disappears, or working with a thought that keeps kind of, in a way, torturing us, and then suddenly we're able to get it, and we see how when we're able, our mindfulness is able to contain the thought with no agenda, not trying to suppress it or force it or do anything to it. We're just able to contain it. It releases. That's a realization. It's a gradual realization. Another gradual realization is, there's so many. We, especially on retreat, you probably notice that many hours, we're just like, we're trying to watch the breath and thoughts are taking us over and we're watching the breath and it's wandering off and I'm getting distracted by this or whatever. And then suddenly, wow, it's just your mind together with the breath. And it's like suddenly you're able to just watch it effortlessly. It might last just a few seconds at the beginning. It's like just a few seconds. Then you say something, oh, wow, this is great. And then the mind gets disrupted, it gets destabilized again. Okay, that's fine. But that's a gradual realization. And that'll happen more and more and more. And there's many little things like that. I mean, almost every single one of the interviews, probably all, I would say all the interviews, people reported, having a kind of the struggles of, the first day or two. And as day 2 and day 3 happen, it's like, oh, there's something that's shifted. Something is shifted. And it's a little bit easier. It's still hard. It's not easy, but it's a little bit easier. Those are micro realizations. And these realizations gradually culminate. I spoke about this a little bit last night, but one of the first realizations you'll get is the distinction between mind and matter. That's physical and that's mental. And then if you can really kind of continue to see that, you'll come to the realization that there's this connection, that there's a cause and effect process happening. That when I observe the pain in a certain way, that pain starts to change. And then maybe I feel a flood of heat come up my body, and it's like almost overwhelming, but my mind is able to adjust, and then that relaxes back down. That's all cause and effect. You're able to see it. Yeah? Yeah. Maybe you notice a tendency to, here we're on day 3, that means there's day 4 and there's day 5 and there's day, is this day 3, this is day 4? I don't know where I'm at. This is the 3rd full day, right? Yeah, so we're finishing our 3rd full 24-hour period. It's even more than that. Day 4, so we have day 5 tomorrow and then on Sunday. So maybe, and I say this with the most caution, so I want you to kind of be cautious with me when I say this. Sunday's the end of the retreat, and I go home, I'm going to see my friends, I'm going to see my family, I have to do this, I have to do that. Be careful, because the planning mind, so you see the tendency of the planning mind. Maybe some of us have already seen that. We see the tendency of the planning mind already thinking ahead. So wait a second, planning. We really kind of stop, like the man stepping into the hole, we're going to pull the brakes. And we bring our mindfulness to that planning mind, and then it starts to relax, and we're here in the rest point once again. Yeah, that's like a realization. These things, again, it's a little by little incremental developmental path. These things are super important. And then maybe for half the day you forget all that. And it's okay. It's just like a big mess of whatever thoughts. It's okay. Don't worry. Don't worry if that's happening. It's normal. So these realizations are quite gradual and they're incremental and they compound. And then there are these sudden realizations that kind of, bring about a transformation in consciousness that change everything, but, you have to build up for those. But they are there and they do come. There's a famous verse from the Dhammapada. Dhammapada is the short verses of the Buddha, where he says, with meditation, wisdom will be gained. With the practice of meditation, wisdom will be gained. Without the practice of meditation, wisdom will be lost. Knowing these two paths of gain and loss, one should practice so that wisdom increases. So if I change this a little bit, because when he says with the practice of meditation, he's speaking about mindfulness meditation, not concentration-based meditation. They're different. Yeah? In Buddhism, they also have concentration-based meditation. Concentration-based meditations are things like mantras or visualizations, where you have a kind of a concept, a conceptual object that becomes the focus of your meditation, and you absorb into deep concentration. Counting the breaths is a concentration-based meditation. So some people actually have that practice. So it's a good practice to begin your mindfulness practice with, your mindfulness meditation with. 5 minutes of concentration, mantra, or if that's part of your practice, the mind becomes super, super collected. Drop the concentration, and go into mindfulness. With concentration-based meditations, mantras and visualizations and things like that, they develop a tremendous amount of concentration, like deep, deep concentrative absorption, and the primary characteristic is, or the goal, or the result is peace and calmness, tranquility of the mind. Mindfulness-based meditations are different. They don't develop tranquility of the mind, although you will experience tranquility of the mind in mindfulness meditation, but it comes and it goes. Mindfulness-based meditation develops wisdom. It doesn't develop peace and calmness, it develops wisdom. The reason being is that with concentration meditation, you absorb so deep into the object of meditation, the conceptual object, that the sense doors close down. So you don't hear, smell, see, and you don't feel. All those pains that we have in the body, they're gone. So it's very peaceful, and the mind is super quiet. With mindfulness-based meditation, the sense doors, all 6 sense doors, my ears, my nose, my eyes, my taste, my physical sensations, and the mind, those 6 doors are open. And we meditate with mindfulness on what's currently arising in our experience. And sometimes those experiences are pleasant, sometimes they're unpleasant. And it turns out, like I said in day 1, it's that kind of combination of having awareness and the ability to work with unpleasantness, which is the right conditions for developing wisdom. So, like my own teacher, Sadhu Pandit, used to say that, concentration-based meditation is like going to war, going into a battle with a shield. That you have a shield, so whenever the bullets or the swords or the arrows come, you're protected. So it's you're protected. You don't experience any pain in concentration-based meditation. Mindfulness-based meditation is like going into battle with a sword. So you can cut through delusion, you can cut through all those thoughts and all those, whatever we have. This is just a metaphor, right? I'm not suggesting that mindfulness should be aggressive like that, but not at all. But we have this kind of sword of insight, but we're not protected. So all of the arrows and strikes and blows, we receive them all. We feel them all. That's the bad news. But the good news is it develops wisdom. So with the practice of meditation, wisdom is gained. With the practice of mindfulness-based meditation, wisdom is gained. Without the practice of mindfulness meditation, wisdom is lost. Knowing these 2 paths of wisdom and of gain and loss, choose the path and practice that gains wisdom. And that simply means, the more you meditate, the more your insights will be there. You stop meditating, and then suddenly the insights, I don't remember what was going on. Then you go back and meditate, oh no, I remember that was, you stop meditating for a while, and it's like, oh, I don't remember anymore. And then you go on retreat, and it's like everything becomes so clear, and it's like, oh wow, crystal clear, yes. You stop meditating for some months or a year or whatever, maybe a few years, and you just forget it all. So you got to plug back into meditation. Anybody see Captain Kirk go to space? Captain Kirk. Any Trekkies here? Any Trekkies? Really? Did you see that? Big Blue. Big Blue was this, Bezos from Amazon created a rocket and shot it up. And he put civilians in his rocket, and he chose William Shatner, who is he's not, you know who William Shatner is? Okay. So you know what Star Trek is? Yeah, okay. I'm a Trekkie. I grew up with Star Trek, so. Star Trek, science fiction. I love science fiction. Star Trek, the original series, had Captain Kirk. He was the good-looking, dashing captain who had no morality, basically. He did, but he didn't. He broke the rules all the time. Anyways, the actor's name was William Shatner, and he's 90 years old now. He's still alive. He looks pretty healthy still. And Bezos invited him to go up in this rocket, to space. And he's the oldest man that was ever in space now. And it's kind of great because, all these years we're watching him on TV as a captain, Captain Kirk. All these years we're watching him on TV as Captain Kirk. And now he actually goes to outer space, yeah? But did you see the video of him up there? He got up there and he comes like floating, like weightlessness. He blew his mind. He was like, he couldn't speak. He was really like, talk about realization. It totally blew his mind. That's like a realization. Can you imagine first time going into space? Every astronaut says the same thing when they come back, that they're just changed forever. That perspective is so cosmic that they change forever. In one of the original series of Star Trek, there was an episode called Spock's Brain. You know who Spock is? Do you know who Spock is? Spock's the guy with the pointy ears. Yeah. He's the Vulcan. He's very smart, very logical, no emotions. And Vulcans are different than humans. They have like 3 hearts and like a really complex brain and stuff like that. So in this episode of Spock's Brain, the Dharma of Star Trek, in this episode of Spock's Brain, they were going through space, whatever they're doing. They're going through space, and they get a distress call, SOS. There's something, there's a little ship out there, and they go and they rescue it. And inside the ship is one man, and they bring him into their ship. They transport him over, and he's kind of an imbecile. He's like not smart. He's not smart at all. He's just kind of a dumb guy. And they're like, what's he doing? He didn't know why he was out there, but they rescued him. And they just let him, since he wasn't like an imbecile, they let him go around the ship as he wanted. And then everybody went to sleep on the ship. And they woke up the next morning and they said, they go to the deck and they're like, we have to operate the starship. But where's Spock? I don't know. They go to Spock's room. And somebody had removed Spock's brain from his head. And he had some type of machine on his head to keep him alive. He was still alive, but he had no brain. And like, what happened? What happened? They're looking around, and where's that stupid guy? The stupid guy's gone. And where's his ship? His ship's gone. So they figured it out. This guy, he stole Spock's brain, and he left with the spaceship. Star Trek's great, but this is one of the more stupid episodes, as you can probably. So they went to look for him. They somehow tracked him and they found him. And he went to this planet. And in the planet, there was an AI. There was a computer. It wasn't called AI back then, but there was a computer that was intelligent, that was operating the planet. But the computer was dying. And they needed Spock's brain to keep it alive. I told you it's a very stupid episode. So now the way that the computer taught this imbecile to do the operation on Spock's brain. How could a stupid guy? So they had a machine where you could actually plug in your brain into the machine. It downloads the information. This is before the Matrix and all that. It downloads the information. You get the information and then you become smart. But it has this shelf life. It doesn't last long. So it was long enough for him to go to the ship, pretend he was stupid, to do the operation, to bring it back. And now they went and found him, and they found Spock's brain, and this guy was stupid again. He was really stupid again. He couldn't do the operation. He said the wisdom wore off. He said, oh my God, how are we going to do this? So they figured out, and Spock, by the way, can't speak because he's just like a zombie. And they want to get Spock's brain out of the machine and back into Spock. So the doctor, Dr. McCoy, Bones was his name, he plugged his head into the machine and to learn how to do the operation. Because it's human brain surgery is already a lot to do for a human, but for a Vulcan, it's like 10 times more difficult. So he plugged it in, and then as McCoy came out of the machine, he's like, oh my God, I see it. It's so clear. I understand it. Okay, let's do the operation. So he starts doing the operation. It's a very long operation. He's like, yeah, no, it's so simple. Look, it's like that, it's like this, it's like that. And hour after hour after hour, his intelligence, the information started to wear off. And he gets about 70% into the operation and he doesn't remember what he's supposed to do. So, oh my God, how can I do this? I don't know how to do it anymore. And this is the most dangerous part because Spock's, open brain surgery. And somehow he connected Spock's voice, and then Spock was able to tell him, so McCoy, I told you it's stupid. Spock was able to talk to him and help him figure out how to finish the operation. So they finished the operation, and there wasn't even a scar. It was amazing. Like a Frankenstein monster, there's a scar, but this guy had no scar. So then Spock lived, and we have another 30 years of Star Trek because of that. And thank God, thank God for Spock's brain. And it's like this machine, it's like you could plug your head into this machine, get the wisdom, and plug it out, and you're wise for a certain amount of time, but then that time would go by, the wisdom would wear off. And then you're just who you are again. There's no more wisdom. And our meditation practice is very much like that. That we're, in a way, we're plugging into Spock's brain, kind of. As we practice with mindfulness, and we slowly, the threshold of perception gets deeper and deeper, we're able to see these insights. And these insights gradually, slowly start to, right now our consciousness, the stream of consciousness is kind of dominated with the habits of our life. However many years we're alive, we have habits of our life. And the stream of consciousness is dominated with wandering thoughts or random thoughts or obsessive thoughts or fears or desires or aversion or sleepiness or less. Just, normal stuff, which are not always the most healthy or the most functional or even good habits. And as we practice our mindfulness meditation, we're plugging more and more into this kind of like a wisdom machine. And that wisdom is gradually being downloaded. And the way it happens is that we begin to actually see Vipassana. Mindfulness-based meditation is called Vipassana. And Vipassana is also translated as, what is Vipassana? What would you say Vipassana in English? Anybody? Yeah, insight meditation. Yeah, there's different ways to say it. Different. But it's often translated as insight meditation. Why? Because we're having developmental insights along the way. But that's actually not the direct translation. V refers to the three universal characteristics. Anupassana, the Pali word anupassana, is a repeated contemplation. So we're repeatedly contemplating the three universal characteristics of existence. And these are characteristics that condition all physical and non-physical phenomena in the universe. I'll say that again. Everything in the universe, whether it's physical or energy or whatever, non-physical, everything in the universe, everything in the universe, everything in the universe is conditioned by these three characteristics. The first one is impermanence. Nothing is permanent in the universe. There are things that are stable, like our sun is stable for some time. Millions of years, I don't know how long, but a long time. But we also know that at some point it's going to, supernova, and it's going to be gone. Black hole. So it's not really permanent. Nothing in the universe is permanent. Nothing physical or non-physical or immaterial in the universe is permanent. Even science knows that. If you look at an atom, the most basic kind of building block of matter, it's there's the nucleus, and it's surrounded by what? Okay, so electrons, protons, something like that, if you remember from high school. Now, the electrons, these little things that are going around the nucleus, the electrons are turning on and off. So the electron pops into existence, goes around the proton or the nucleus, and then it disappears. Where does it go? Who knows? Where does it go? Even science can't tell you where it goes. But then it comes back on again, and then it disappears again, then it pops on again, then it disappears again, then it pops on again. So even the most basic matter, the most basic building block of matter, it's not permanent. It's coming and going, it's coming and going. Everything in the universe is like that. And in our mindfulness-based meditation, you're going to begin to see that. That's one of the gradual realizations, that as the eye of insight begins to open, as the threshold of perception deepens, you'll begin to see anicca, impermanent nature of phenomena. Now, the way that can happen, it's very interesting. I don't know if anybody's experienced this. My guess is that on this retreat, some people have. You're watching the breath, and it's like, okay, there's the breath. But then I'm kind of following the breath, and it's like something weird. I don't know. It's like what I see is doing that, and what I feel is doing this, and it's kind of changing or distorting, or sometimes it feels like the breath is maybe going over there, or sometimes it feels like it's going over here, or sometimes it's like the breath is going up and down, and it's not the same every single time. The breath is always changing. If you're watching closely, you never step into the same river twice, right? You know the saying, you never step into the same river twice. You never see the same breath twice, unless you count. If you count, no, it's okay. Again, that's concentration. So counting will regulate the breath, or if you're doing yoga breathing, or if you're doing some type of exercise, like breath work that you've learned, that regulates the breath and it stabilizes. And again, that's all good practice. It's just not mindfulness practice, that's all I'm saying. So with mindfulness practice, what's going to happen is it's going to change. You're going to go through a process of change, and you'll see that directly. You'll start to see the breath changing. It was long, and now suddenly it becomes short. I walked here, my breath was really comfortable. I came, I sat down, I started being mindful. Why is it tight now? My breath suddenly is tight. That's anicca. You're seeing the true nature of phenomena. You're seeing the universal characteristic that suddenly is like, well, why is it suddenly tight? Or it was tight and then suddenly, whoa. I don't even know why. It just released. Now it's free. That's anicca. That's actually beginning to see the deeper insights. The first universal characteristic is anicca, and that's a realization. Those are gradual realizations. The second universal characteristics, oh, by the way, not just with the breath, but mental states. Again, I've spoke a lot in the interviews with people that the first day the mind was kind of occupied with this, and day 2 and day 3, that's just shifted and changed. It's not the same place anymore. For some people, it was like challenging first few days, and now it's like easier. For other people, first few days, come in and calm, a lot of peace, a lot of calmness, great. Day 2, day 3 is like, oh no, now it's not so easy anymore. That's development. Yeah? If we're not careful, we're going to think, oh, something happened in my practice. It was so calm and peaceful, and now it's not really good. No, it was calm and peaceful. It's not. Now it's changed, because change is what happens, and that's the forward-leading path. That's progress. So we have to be careful how we interpret it, these experiences sometime. So not only will the breath change, but also our mental states will change. And that's the first of the 3 universal characteristics that we begin to realize in the practice. The second of the 3 universal characteristics that we begin to realize in the practice is dukkha. And we've been speaking, the first day we spoke a lot about dukkha, unsatisfactoriness. So I won't go into that here, but anytime you're really contemplating unsatisfactoriness, you're contemplating dukkha. That universal characteristic is beginning to rub into consciousness. And that's what gradually changes. That's what gradually transforms us. Seeing the universal characteristic of change gradually changes us, transforms us. Seeing the universal characteristic of unsatisfactoriness gradually transforms us. And the third of the 3 universal characteristics, anicca, dukkha, and anatta, impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and non-self. Non-self. Non-self, of course, is really one of the. Actually, anatta, non-self, is the central realization of Buddhism. That's the central realization of certainly of mindfulness-based meditation. That the sense of self goes through a process of change and deconstruction and dissolution and eventually liberation in the state of meditation. And the deep end territory of meditation, the high level stages of meditation, there's really no sense of self at all. In that state, you stop meditating, the self comes back, and you're there, you're still who you are. But the way that appears in our meditation practice is, for example, you're observing the breath, and I mentioned it before, and then suddenly, it just suddenly becomes easy. Where you're observing a pain, and a pain just, like a little mist or puff of smoke, poof, it's gone. And suddenly, it's a sense of timeless, a sense of selfless, a sense of spacelessness, and a sense of effortlessness. So those are little beautiful, wonderful experiences that some people are already reporting. Yeah, a lot of people are reporting actually. Even if it's just a few seconds, that's really something. Yeah, that means that you're already seeing that third universal characteristic of non-self, just pure observer. And again, the mind might jump in and say, "Oh, wow, this is great. Oh, I'm really meditating now," and then suddenly the self jumps back in. Okay, not a problem. Have to happen a few times. Those realizations keep, as they come again and again, you'll be able to just kind of slide into that and stay with that. And you might find yourself at the end of the 30-minute meditation period and you're just like, this is going really well. Don't get up and walk. Just keep sitting, keep practicing. Just like, if your mindfulness and energetic effort and your concentration are stable, and there's kind of an effortlessness to it, just keep going. Don't worry about the schedule. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Because we don't have those experiences always. If you do find yourself in one of those experiences and it's the end of the sitting, just keep sitting and do yourself a favor. So these are the three universal characteristics that we gradually begin to kind of realize. And again, realization is a gradual development. And then it's sudden. And then the integration of that insight or the integration of that wisdom into your daily life, that's also very gradual. Yeah? Takes some time.
Could you repeat it? Timeless, spaceless,
Oh.
effortless? What was the third?
Well, it was selfless. Yeah. So it's like, if you're just in that place and there's no sense of self, although there's an observer, there's no sense of time. You're not really worried about, there's no past and future in that moment. There's with time and space are together, yeah. So if there's no sense of time, there's probably no sense of space. Like boundaries are kind of really relaxed at that point. And then it's also effortless. There's no effort. Oh, and it's also, there's no problems. There are really no problems in that state. That's why I say keep sitting, if you can. That's the secret is no self, no problem. No self, no problem. All that dukkha disappears. And when you're kind of experiencing this characteristic of anatta, of non-self, it's free of dukkha. In that moment, you might even have a little pain in the leg or something, but you don't experience it as pain at all. And it's quite literally. Now these three states, these three universal characteristics, we cycle through them. We cycle through periods of change, then we cycle through periods of discomfort, unpleasantness, and unsatisfactoriness, and then we cycle through periods of non-self. And then that non-self, which is stable and like everything's great, it starts to kind of change and things come in, and that's interesting at the beginning. Changing is happening, that's cool, and then that change starts to become unpleasant, and then dukkha comes back, and like, yeah, and then that's the natural. These three universal characteristics are cycling all the time. In fact, they've been cycling forever and for always, and they always will be cycling. We just don't see it. We don't see it. It's below the threshold of perception. As you start to develop your mindfulness, the threshold of perception deepens, and you might, find yourself like, wow, super focused, deep concentration, and things are just like dissolving away. You're kind of moving into these three universal characteristics in a much stronger way. And anatta, they all kind of culminate with anatta. That one, the beginning you'll see a lot of change in your practice, and you'll see a lot of dukkha in your practice. Maybe even, there might even be periods of like disgust and, where you don't really feel good and your favorite foods, you don't want to eat your favorite foods anymore. And, you look in the mirror and you're like, there's just nothing, and that's just the course of the practice that's happening. Yeah. And then you'll move through, and there'll be much more of a, as you move into the more advanced stages, much more anatta, selfless. There's like non-self. And it's kind of literally like, removing of the self. There's a Japanese, a famous Japanese Zen poet from like the 17th century. His name was Ryokan. He left a lot of like haiku and poems behind. And Ryokan was he was an interesting character because he didn't live in a monastery. He didn't study. He just meditated. And as monks do, they have to eat every day, so they take their bowl and they go around the village, and then people donate rice or fish or whatever. That's their daily food. They take that back. If they live in the hut, if they live in the forest in a hut, they go back and they eat that. That's their daily food, and then they meditate. That's their life. Some monks stay in the monastery and they study all day long, and then they teach. And that's also part of Buddhism. Well, Ryokan wasn't a study or teaching monk. He was a practice monk, and he also loved kids. He loved to play, so he would go out on his rounds, and if there were kids outside playing with a ball or something, he would just stop, put down his bowl. He would play with them all day long, to the point where sometimes he forgot even to get food. And he would have to go a day without food because he was always playing with the kids. He was well known for that. Everybody loved him. He was a sweet guy. And he just wrote these incredible, he left behind a lot of really beautiful poems. And one day, Ryokan went out for his rounds, and actually not even for his rounds, he went out for something. And he came back to he had a simple little hut in the forest, in the mountains. And he came back and somebody had broke into his hut. And they stole his possessions. They stole his bowl. They stole his calligraphy pen. And they stole his blanket for sleeping. All of his possessions. And he sat there, kind of contemplating it. And he wrote a poem. Or I guess they stole his pen, so he wrote a poem in his head. He said, "The thief left it behind, the moon in the window." That's selflessness. It's like not mine. No, it's gone. Okay, and when it's gone, when everything's taken away, when it's all gone, what's left? Say it again? Yeah, the poem? Yeah. So he sat down and he just kind of contemplated in his room. And he said that the thief left it behind, the moon in the window. So if you take everything away, really, let's take everything away. Take away the lights, take away the phone, the camera. Take this away, take that away, take away your possessions, take it all away. Take everything, take away the self, take it away, take it away, take it away. What's left? What's left? I asked quite a few people in the interviews, what do you see here, what do you see there? And often the answer is nothing. It's very normal. And I said, well, tell me more. What do you mean nothing? Yeah, nothing. I said, well, wait a second. If you open a door, if you're outside in the sun, and your eyes are like adjusted to sunlight, you go into a house, and you open a door that's really dark, and you look inside, what do you see? It's very dark. You see nothing. It's dark. Well, actually, you don't see nothing. The quality there is darkness. There's something there always that we're seeing. The quality is darkness. And as you continue to observe into that dark room, as the eyes adjust in this metaphor, oh wait, there's something over there and there's something over there, but that's the best I can describe it. Maybe it's kind of squarish, I don't know what it is, it's longish. You find the words to describe it. Then after time, as the eyes adjust, you say, wait, that's a chair over there, and that's a bench, and that's a piano, and that's a lamp. You can see it. You begin to see it. It's the same thing. Quite often when we enter new territory, we look at something for the first time. What do you see? Well, nothing. Or seeing something, but you don't have words for it. Yeah, great. Keep observing it. Repeated contemplation. What do you see? What do you see? The thief left it behind, the moon at my window. And that's the gradual realization that happens through our practice. The noble practice of realization is a gradual process. And then it's sudden. And when it's sudden, it changes everything. It brings about a revolution in consciousness, and you don't go back. Like the man who came to that road after all that history of suffering and pain and practice and failures and actually victories. He came to that road and he didn't go down that road anymore. The realization was solid. So I'll finish off today with a kind of a story. I think it was from the book Slaughterhouse 5, if I'm not mistaken. And there was a scene in that book where the American soldiers were watching a newsreel. Like in World War II, the American soldiers were somewhere, and they were in a hangar and they were watching a movie, but it was a newsreel, and it was about the war in Europe. And somehow the movie got put on backwards. They turn it on and they're watching, and they see, let me get it right, they see these really busted up, broken airplanes, like shot and bombed and broken airplanes and the wings off and dead airmen inside. There's a lot of blood and everything. They take off from a field in England, and they fly backwards over the English Channel. They fly over Europe, and they probably fly over Belgium or whatever, and they fly over Germany. And as they get to Germany, the German guns start sucking all of the shrapnel and bombs out of the airplanes. They're pulling it out of the planes. And they're like, and the planes are getting fixed, as they're flying backwards, they're actually getting fixed. And then the planes fly backwards over these kind of German cities, and the planes, they open the doors, and they start, and these cities they're on fire, and they're burning, and this whole kind of destruction's going on. And these planes start to kind of gather all the fire into one thing, and they just suck it up from the cities into the bellies of the plane. And then suddenly the cities become repaired, and they become a whole city again, and they're just you can imagine. Then the planes turn around, they fly backwards back towards England, and on the way back, some German Messerschmitts, like the fighter pilots, go up, and there's a few holes in the airplane still, so they suck out those bullets and those holes from the planes, and other planes are whole, and they fly all the way back to England. They land in England. And then some guys get out and they run backwards to the plane, and they take these bombs, these big cylinders off the airplane, and they load them into trucks, and they take those trucks, they take all the bombs, they take them to the docks in England, they put them onto ships, and then the ships go backwards across the Atlantic Ocean, they get to the United States, and they start to unload those bombs, and those bombs are all taken to factories. And in the factories, the bombs are taken apart, and very touchingly, this work was done by women. They took apart all the bombs, and they took out all the metal, and they took out all the dangerous materials, and they separated it into the minerals. And then they put those minerals in big containers, and they put those on trucks. And those trucks drove out to the desert, to the mountain. They drove to all these remote places where there were very big holes, and they put those minerals back in the holes where these tractors came, and they covered them up. And they buried those holes, and then at the end, they planted trees and flowers, and then the movie was over. That's what we're doing. That's the work we're doing with mindfulness-based meditation. All this stuff, the realizations are very, very gradual until everything's back together. Of course, it's not back together. It's never back together. Never the perfection we had back then that we lost, and it's like, oh my God. It's never back together, but it's forward together. Somebody was talking about evolving, I forget who it was, my practice is evolving. Yeah, it's evolving forward to where we become whole and healed. So with that, I want to wish you all, that you all kind of are able to kind of recognize this gradual realization, and really embrace it as a practice, as a gradual practice of realization that's healing, that makes us whole again. And that's supported by our gradual practice of letting go, relinquishing, the grasping and clinging. And that's supported by our gradual ability to accept what's happening, to accept the dissatisfaction that's there quite a bit. It's there quite a bit. And with that, may your gradual realizations also become a sudden realization, where things change once and forever and for always. You just don't go down that road anymore. Thank you. So I have a few questions that came up. And also, if anybody else has a question, I can take it. One of the questions I actually took care of in the interview. I found your question, so we can probably pass in. One question from Afra. Yeah, do you mind if I read it, or is it personal?
No, you can, yeah.
I think the reason I say this is because I think it'd be helpful. I think it'll be helpful. Maybe other people have such experience. So, Afra says that very often, and then you can describe it more if you want. Yeah. Very often in my meditation, I feel as if I get disconnected. I detach from my body. It's a physical something experience. Physical sensational? Yeah, physical sensational experience. I seem to be floating and cannot feel my body, to the extent that I cannot feel whether my hand is something lying. Why don't you tell us what's going on?
Actually, I reflected more on it.
Yeah.
Because I experience this quite often in my meditations.
Yep.
That the body feels very light.
Yep.
And I cannot even feel it.
Yep.
To the extent that I cannot even feel it, my hand up or down.
Okay.
I know it's up, but I can't feel it. And I reflected a little bit more.
Yeah.
When I was in that, when I was having that feeling again. And it's just, there's a body, it's very light, I can't feel it, I feel the boundaries of my body, There's breath, there's a mind, and there's space.
Great.
And
that's great, yeah.
All
okay.
experiencing.
Yeah.
And now it made me reflect that it feels like there's no difference between the body or this. Like, it's just...
That's great, that's great. Okay.
And then I start focusing, oh, that feels nice and floaty,
and then you're back. There it is, right there. It's what the mind does, yeah. That's so remember I was talking before about selflessness? So this is, not everybody experiences it like that, but this is kind of the phenomena that comes up when we move into a state of selflessness. Now, by the way, this also is associated with good concentration. So, not every day, not all day long is the concentration good. Is there a question with that?
Well, I was initially thinking that, ooh, is this normal? And am I getting attached to the sensation?
Mm-hmm.
Which I am once I get it.
It could be, yeah, absolutely.
Nice gone. But now it made me reflect more when you were speaking, like, yeah, it's that sense of there's no space.
Yeah.
And it's full concentration.
Yeah.
But it lasts just a few seconds.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
And by the way, the talks that I'm giving are usually peppered with somehow here and there directed to you, because we're doing the interview together, and I kind of I try to direct it a little bit sometimes. So we have an interview tomorrow, so we can go into the details. Yeah. So that is kind of it's not an uncommon experience. Yeah? Not everybody experiences that, but it's not uncommon. As we start to get into more kind of states of dissolution or deep concentration and anatta, or non-self, the boundaries of the self can really recede or fade a little bit, and then we have this sense of expanded space. It can also feel like the body's distorted. Hands are like this or like that, or the hands over there. I'm meditating, but my leg's up there. Or the body can feel like it's kind of stretching up, or sometimes the body feels like it's kind of being compacted down. All of these things are experiences of selflessness. Sorry, I have a cramp, a spasm here in my foot. So it's what did you ask? What was the question? Is that right? What was the question?
Well, the question was, is it common?
Yeah. It's definitely practice related. It's not uncommon. That's the answer that you usually give in meditation in meditation centers. It's not uncommon. So it means it's okay. It's something that people report from time to time. Yeah, and it's good. Now, what I would say in that you want to be cautious of is not to. It is associated with concentration. So if it gets a little bit dreamy and just kind of like floating out, then you want to ground your attention in the physical body. So go back to the breath. And even if you want to just kind of put your fingers on the ground and feel that, that's just a way to do it. You don't have to do it, but if you feel like it's a little bit really disconnected, then try to connect it back down to, something. But not to change the state, but just to direct the attention into more of a physical. Because all those phenomena the way that you're describing the phenomena, if you pinpoint that on the movement of the breath, you're going to see that same phenomena, but in that really kind of pinpointed observation. And you'll see some really interesting things happening with the breath. If you can manage to kind of train the mind to stay moment by moment with each physical sensation that happens on the in-breath and each physical sensation that happens on the out-breath. There's kind of an expansiveness, and then there's a micro targeting. I don't know if targeting is the right word, but and there's the general, and then there's the particular, and you'll really start to kind of see a particular experience, like particles. Okay? Great. I'll read the other question. If anybody has a question, we can take it afterwards. Can you clarify the difference between mindfulness and concentration? Thank you. So that's really super simple. Well, no, it's not super. It's a short, to the point question. Today I talked about the difference between concentration and effort, right? Energetic effort. Energetic effort is the energy that kind of directs the mind to the object. There's certain energy that's there. Like when you get sleepy, you can't be bothered. There has to be some energy there. And concentration is like the aim. That really, it's like, okay, like I was just telling you, to really bring it to that takes concentration to really follow the pinpointed or one precise physical sensations. That takes a certain concentration. And effort is the movement there. Mindfulness is different. So if we look at now these three mental factors of effort, energetic effort, mindfulness, and concentration, they're the core of the controlling faculties. There's 5 controlling faculties. There's faith. These are faculties of the mind that determine the rate of progress in your practice. And as you practice mindfulness, these 5 things grow. And as you practice mindfulness, these 5 things balance. The first one is faith. The second one is energetic effort. They're called the indriya. Anyways, the second one is energetic effort. The third one is mindfulness. The fourth one is concentration. And the fifth one is wisdom. These 5 things will grow and they'll balance as you go through the practice. The basic quality of mindfulness, without getting too much into the differences or the definitions, the basic quality of mindfulness is that it sinks. Remember? I spoke about this on the first day. that it sinks, it deepens. You don't dive, you just be mindful and it sinks. That's the quality of mindfulness. The basic quality and characteristic of concentration is that it collects the scattered mind, right? Collects the mind. So who asked that question? Yeah. So the collecting of the mind onto one experience that you're observing, that's the concentration. And then the holding of that there. Whereas the sinking of the understanding, and when I say sinking, there's a knowing. Like if right now, if you pay attention to your breath, you'll know what's there. The deepening that happens is that knowing gets deeper. So those two factors are slightly different. They're considered two different mental factors. And then effort is what actually sends it there. Yeah. Make sense? Yeah. Anybody else? TMI?
More